Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm a men's dating, relationship, and intimacy coach. I can almost forget my own name. These titles are far too complicated. I help men live, I help men really live, basically. Help them live more of life. I come across a lot of men who are really tapping into fear, and which is stopping them from really living. It's causing them to hide, whether that's in relationships, dating, their careers, in their businesses. And I help them live more. I help them move past that fear and take bold action that's going to get them where they want to. And this episode, I'm joined for a wonderful man, Cyrus. He a men's work facilitator, transformational coach, and healer. And he popped up on my Instagram, and we got talking about the work he does around, his native war dance. He's from New Zealand, so the haka, and he incorporates that into his men's work and his retreats that he runs. And I felt that was a really interesting view because, I think the thing with men's work that I see is there's a lot of talk about men's work, but it can sometimes feel very exclusive to being, a white man from America, United States, incorporating ideas. And to see a man bring in something that was definitely diverse from an ethnic culture that we know of, I know of from being from the UK, we know of New Zealand and the Maori people. I thought that was really interesting as a topic, and he was a wonderful man to speak to. And, in this episode, we talk a lot about men's work and how we can be playful warriors, which is a really interesting part of what we talk about, because I think a lot of men really struggle with playfulness, or they struggle with being warriors in their lives. And I think he really brings a beautiful flair for that and how that can be done. We talk a lot about, authentic relating to people authentically, which is, a big part of obviously what I do. We talk a lot about having role models and the importance of those and how you can find those. We talk deeply about the haka and what it is, the different essences and different parts of it. We talk a lot about Maori culture in terms of how the men show up and what lessons Western men can take in being more connected, more family oriented, more loving, more showing more strength, more determination, and more leadership. So we talk about all those sorts of topics. So it's a wonderful episode. Highly recommend. Obviously, I'm here. If any of these topics are stuff that you really want to talk about deeply, feel free to drop me an email at hello@theauthenticman.net, or get me on Instagram, which is @theauthenticman_. We can talk about coaching or something like that. But before we get into the episode, I can let you know about some events I've got coming up. I've got an event that's coming up, which is my masculinity workshop, which is probably going to be tonight if you're listening to this on the day. And if you've missed it, then I probably will run it again. So it's all going to be about masculinity and how we can sharpen this deeply embodied, deeply connected way of being men that allows us to be powerful, to lead, to be caring, to be nurturing to those around us, which is all really important things. I'm going to really delve into that and around toxic masculinity and how we can not be toxic and where toxicity really comes from. I've also got a masterclass with my partner Orsa. We're running a Tantra for Couples, which is always a really beautiful workshop. A lot of couples leave smiling and very happy. And that's coming up on the 20th of March. And the final workshop I've got coming up is a mindful masturbation. And this is really, I talk a lot about porn addiction in the workshop, about what porn addiction is and, you know, how it comes about and how we can move through porn addiction. But I also talk about, you know, creating a self-pleasure practice for men that is mindful and that can connect them to their bodies and their sexuality and increase their sexual energy. Because a lot of men I come across, they really struggle with that part. You know, they watch a lot of porn, they feel disconnected in their bodies and their imaginations, and when they have sex, they're not present. So really, this is all about how to be more deeply present during sex, and how you can kind of create that on your own without a partner. It's a wonderful workshop. Everyone that's ever been has really loved it, and I've had really rave reviews, so I highly recommend it. All the links for all these workshops will all be in the show notes below. But without further ado, I'm going to get into the episode. So welcome people back to another episode. I have a very wonderful guest who I've been kind of talking to through the wonderful world of Instagram, on and off for probably a year or so now, maybe. And, you know, you get a picture, you get an impression of people through Instagram and the work they do. And I got a real impression of a woman with a lot of energy for life, a lot of zest for living. We've had conversations about all sorts of topics, but through the various voice notes and so forth. And maybe the only topic we might not have talked about is the topic we're going to talk about today, which is astrology. So I'd like to welcome you today to Cato, and she is an astrologer and spiritual teacher. How are you doing, Cato?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really good, thank you.
It's been a while. We've talked about all sorts of things, from sacred sexuality to dating to our patterns through the various DMs and videos and even voice messages. I don't think we've really talked about the thing that when I first saw your account, that really jumped out to me, obviously, was something that we're deeply passionate about, which is astrology.
Yes, absolutely. I remember our conversations actually being around a little bit about astrology, and you said that you know a little about it, so that's quite exciting, but also about open relationships and about ISTA. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I remember well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask your experience with the open relationship stuff, because I was battling a little bit and going through my own shits, and I was just so curious to hear your point of view of it, because it's not very common, you know. And yeah, I just love the work that you do, and I find it very inspiring. So it's beautiful that we are Instagram friends now.
No, likewise. I take much joy in reading your posts, and you know, I've also seen like an evolution through your own work. You know, you still talking about astrology, obviously, but there's a lot more to do with, you know, the spiritual realm, as well as, you know, sacred sexuality and relating and coming to our patterns, which I guess falls in line perfectly with the topic of astrology. And
yes,
a question I like to ask all my guests before we get going is, how did you come to do the work that you do now?
I love that. So first of all, I see myself as a multidimensional woman. Like, I'm a manifesting generator in human design. And it also shows up in my astrology chart, is that my MC is in Sagittarius, and I'm so interested in so many different topics. So I talk about astrology, I talk about sacred sexuality, conscious relationships, conscious communication. And it actually stems from my own suffering, from my own pain. And so, to give you a little bit more explanation about that, I have my Chiron, which is a wounded healer, which stands for my pain points in this lifetime. It falls in Libra in the 7th house. So that means that there's some really valuable lessons for me to learn around relationships. And I used to be so bad at it. Like, my communication was so violent, it was horrible. So I was suffering a lot in my previous relationships. So because from that place of crisis, I just realized that I had to do something with it. So I was just reaching out for help. And my mom works as an energetic therapist. So my mom has always been my mentor. She's my best friend. So I'm very lucky to have had her and still have her. She just stayed with me for 2.5 months in Cape Town, which was super sweet. So she was always there and has given me so many insights. And like those little push, like pushes like in the right direction of my purpose. And I'm still young in human years. I'm 24 years old, right?
Oh.
So I'm still a baby. But I don't feel like my age. Like I don't resonate with my age at all. Like I have an old soul, and I came back into this lifetime to remember everything. Like, for example, Tantra and sacred sexuality, when I read about it, when I learn about it, it's like a remembering. It's like an aha moment, like, okay, yes, I know this from past lifetimes or whatever. And it just resonates with me so much. And because it comes from my own experiences, I just realized that this was really profound medicine for me. And now I feel so inclined to share this deep healing medicine with the world and really make an impact. Like I want to build my empire, create something so beautiful with my services so I can be of service to people and I can give back, because that's essentially why I'm here. And it also shows up in my purpose, in my soul's purpose, in my astrology chart.
Beautiful. And how did you come to start studying astrology? What was the kind of path for you?
So I grew up with it. It's like my second language because of
Wow.
my mama bear. She's not an astrologer, but she's always been interested in it. And she has it from her mom. So my grandmother, she was only like, she hasn't like gotten very far with astrology because it wasn't like very much developed. There wasn't like a lot to know about it. It wasn't like very like a hype like it is right now. But so my grandmother, she was only like into sun signs, like you're an Aries, I'm a Leo, etc. And then my mom took it further and she really like took classes and read all the books. And she also works with astrology in her practice. But she's been working with this medicine for I think like 15 years now. And I remember when I was growing up, that we were having conversations about this like at a dinner table when we were on holiday, and she was reading the charts of my best friends, and it was just so much fun. This was like our entertainment. Yeah.
Wow, it's
Yes.
beautiful. It's beautiful that your mother has shared this with you, and it's something you've really grown up with. It's not just, because a lot of people come to this in later life, but it's really something that's been in your being for such a long time.
It is, yeah. I have a lot to thank about, like to my mom, because she's a reason why I have gotten this far at age 24. Like I'm a very conscious being, and I see that as my strength. And this is also the message that I want to share with the world is like, don't wait too long before shit hits the fan, before you start doing the work. Like start doing it at an early age. And this is why I have like so much criticism on the educational system. It's just so outdated, and it's just so much focused on traditional stuff and not like on conscious communication, for example, or yoga or meditation, or how to regulate your nervous system, etc. And I also kind of feel the call to do something with that. Not right now, because I'm not ready yet, but like within now and the next 5 years or 10 years, I would love to change the educational system. And really like, because I feel like if we start doing the work now from an early age, there's like so much less suffering, so like less pain, less shame, taboo, stigma, and so much more. I don't know if does this resonate for you?
Yeah. I think it's I've got a few friends who are teachers actually, and one of my good friends, she teaches primary school kids, and it's interesting now. She does like meditation, she does breath practices with them, and they, maybe to help them relax in the morning or in the afternoon, or bring them into regulation when they're all feeling a bit hyper. And it's amazing that she has the space to do that in her school, to do those sorts of things, because it's just those tiny things that you can teach a child from a young age, that they can go from being hyperactive to relaxing themselves and coming into kind of rest, that they can have the power to do that. Whereas, when I was at school, there wasn't even a consideration. All there was like, learn more facts, read more of this thing and regurgitate it. Whereas now she does a lot of teaching with them around their own emotions. They can understand what emotions are. Oh, I'm feeling this way. And labeling even that is like really revolutionary for young kids.
Absolutely. So I'm learning all about conscious communication right now. It's also called nonviolent communication, Marshall
Mm,
Rosenberg. You're aware of
yeah.
that modality? Yeah, it's has changed my whole life. Like it has created so much more depth and intimacy and connection, not only with myself and with my own emotions and how to express them, but also with the desires that lie in the needs. And then
Mm,
also communicating that and expressing that with my partner or with my loved ones, and that they are also able to communicate in this way back to me. And then we can get like so much deeper. There's so much more understanding and compassion and yeah, connection. And I'm all about that. So I am currently studying my ass off and learning all about it. And I can't wait to share this modality with the world as well.
mm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that I've kind of got on my to-do list in the next kind of couple of years, non-violent communication and authentic relating.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's such an essential skill in relationships because, as you know, the quality of your relationships really depend on the quality of your communication.
Yes.
So if there's no communication, if you're withdrawing or you're very violent in our communication, like there's a lot of like assumptions,
Mm,
or a lot of blaming and criticizing, like you did this, you did that, like not taking ownership. Where
mm,
it's like this modality has really shown me like, okay, I realized like how broken my communication is, and not only with me, but actually like with the majority of the world. And I would love to change that.
mm.
Yeah.
It's a powerful, powerful change. It really would just completely change how we all relate to each other, how we experience each other, how we would feel about our own boundaries and other people's if we could just communicate more from a place of I am
Yeah.
feeling, I am wanting, I am needing,
Yeah.
instead of what we do a lot of the time is like, you are doing, you are making
Yeah.
me, and so forth.
Yeah. You are not meeting my needs.
Yeah,
Like, how dare
exactly.
you? Yeah. Mm,
So I thought we'd change direction and just, because I
yeah.
imagine a lot of my listeners, maybe they have an understanding of astrology, maybe they have very little, right? I know there's a lot of men that follow my podcast. So what are the kind of basics that we can understand? What were the basics of astrology? I know there's like houses and there's a couple other bits, even I am not so familiar, but I have an expert here to explain these
Yeah.
things.
I love it that that there's houses, that it exists. So that's great. So I work as an evolutionary astrologer, and I use astrology as a tool for self-empowerment, where it's all about bringing you back in alignment with your highest self. Like nothing in the birth chart is meant to shock you with information that you don't know about yourself. It's all about a remembering of like who you are in essence, what your purpose is, and how you can share your unique gifts with the world. So when I look at your birth chart, which is based on your birthday details, especially your birth hour, that needs to be accurate in order to have like an accurate reading, right? Um, so this is really like where your highest potential lies, but also where potential blockages are lying, patterns from the past, your childhood stuff, trauma potentially, but also your gifts, and so evolutionary astrology is really looking at like where your soul is coming from past lifetimes and where it's headed towards in this lifetime. So if that sounds woo-woo, I think my gift is actually to make it very grounded and practical. I turn the intangible into the tangible, the mystical into the physical. So you understand it on a soul level and you actually know what to do. You actually understand what the next steps are. And it's like, oh, okay, some spiritual talk, but I actually have no idea how to ingrain it, how to incorporate or embody it. And I'm all about embodiment. So that's really important. So you have the different archetypes. You have 12 archetypes. Then you have the houses. The houses stand for life areas, where this energy is going to manifest. And then you have the planets, so these planets are also going to communicate with one another and by aspects. So we have squares and trines, etc. And these aspects are actually like extra layers to the interpretation. So that's essentially what astrology is. It is in a symbolic language. So I'm just like making an interpretation of your charts and then just seeing like where you are at right now, being 37 yeah, you're turning 38. Like, where
Yeah.
are you on your journey? And that's interesting to look at. Like, and what else to expect? It's kind of, that's called transit. So you have the natal chart, and then you have the transits, and transits are the current planets in relation to your natal chart. And that's kind of like the weather forecast, to see like in what season you're in right now, and how you can co-create with the universe to see like what opportunities are coming my way, and how can I best work or support these energies, because you always have free will. Like, you decide what you want to manifest. This really depends on your level of consciousness. Like, I can't decide that for you as an astrologer, but I can point out like, hey, this is interesting to work with. Like, let's see, what are your goals? Like, what is aligned with your goals? Like, how can we best work with it?
Nice. Wow. I didn't realize it was such a complex movement. Like, obviously the celestial bodies are, there's these huge things out there that are basic, that impact us because of their energetic fields that are, affecting all of us based on the time and when we were born. But I hadn't realized there was like seasons for our lives as well, and like different phases that we are moving through constantly.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always in a different season. Yeah, different life phase. And when something is difficult happening in your life, such as the Saturn return, which is around age 29, or you have Pluto square Pluto, that's like in your late 30s. So you're about to enter that stage, or you're already in it. Exciting. So it's quite challenging. These are periods where you are facing your fears and you're facing your shifts. And it's actually an initiation for you to up level. There's a shift in consciousness. It's a period where you are being invited to reflect on your life, and like, how do you want to move forward? Like, what is happening? What is blocking you? What is holding you back from stepping into your highest potential, etc. So astrology can actually give you exact dates, so when exactly the trauma or like the shit is gonna hit the fan. Let's say it's not always like that, obviously, but there's, like I said, it has different ways of manifesting. And that's really interesting to look at, like, okay, how is that going to be applicable on my life? Does that make sense? Or is it a bit abstract?
No, I'm sitting here now wondering, like, oh my God, is there a date in the future I need to watch out for? It's like, do I need to like make sure I stay at home in my bed and,
No. Definitely don't do that. Like, you can't bypass your spiritual evolution. Like, it's going to happen anyway. But these are all invitations of the universe for you to up level. These tests are there for you to do the work, to step into a new version of yourself. So it can be scary sometimes, but that's actually not my intention with astrology at all. It's to empower you. It's to be like, hey, listen, there is going to be some challenges, or it could also be a really great period. Like, make the most out of it. So that you are aware, and awareness creates choice. And I find that very empowering.
Yeah, no, definitely. Awareness definitely creates choice. I have a question actually, is that is there much science that sits behind astrology? Something I haven't read about, but I'm really interested, because it's a very old science, metaphysics. It's been around since the ages of when people could look in the sky. So I'm interested in what's been researched in terms of astrology.
So it's esoteric. It's not a science, but like you said, it's been around for so long. It's such an ancient, beautiful tool. I don't see it as a science. I see it as an art. You cannot learn an art. You can only invoke it. So let's say you have 100 astrologers in front of you. They will all give you their own interpretation to your charts. It will be more or less the same, but they all like have their own way of working. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so I focus more on spiritual and karmic astrology. But then you have like all these different modalities, and I see it as an art. So I use my intuition, and I feel energy, and whatever I see in the chart, I can't see names or telephone numbers or, but I can see energies, and then I work with what I feel and what I see. So but the science, I do think, like, I believe that astrology is based on astronomy. There wouldn't be astrology if there's no astronomy. So definitely. But if I'm honest with you, I'm not very much into the science part. I went to school for a long time. I studied it at university as well. I did communication sciences. So like, I closed that chapter of my life, and now I'm just really drawn to the psychological part and aspect of astrology, of this wonderful tool. So, but there, I'm sure you can find some wonderful articles about it, like if you want to have some more background information. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I know it's something that, it's been around since the days of the Romans, if I even before that. It's just like working out what's going to happen in the world based on the movements of the celestial. And I always love to call it, instead of just planets, it's like this, because planets, celestial bodies, because it's like that's what we saw them as. We saw them as like they are something way beyond our understanding, our knowing, and even to a certain degree, they still are.
Yes, absolutely. And if we go way, way back, they actually used the moon for harvesting. So the farmers were looking at the stand or the face of the moon, and if they actually noticed that when it is a new moon and they were planting the seeds of their vegetables or plants or whatever, it was actually growing so much faster and fully, like it was fully in bloom. And then they noticed like, there's something around this. And then around the full moon, which is the climax of like heightened emotions, and this is really great for harvesting and really letting go of what no longer is serving us. So we live in cycles. That is what astrology is. Everything is coming back. It's just all cycles, and we are studying the cycles. Yeah.
Studying what's already occurring, because the moon affects so many things, right? We've got it really loves to mess with water, but like the sea, the waves, women's cycles, they're all closely linked to how the moon is moving around us.
Absolutely. The moon is so important. I love working with the moon. It's very powerful for manifestations, like setting your intentions around the new moon, full moon, like writing down what you want to let go of. But obviously I take it much further than that. I really look at my own natal charts and then look at like where the new moon and the full moon falls or sits in which house, because that stands for which life area that I can plant my seeds, or something that has come to a peak or a climax and that I'm like ready to release or have like a realization around, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you can use the moon to really chart when you're going to start an endeavor, maybe start a new practice, maybe start a new business, and be like, this is the perfect time for that.
And do you know what is even more powerful is actually looking at the eclipses. So we have eclipse season twice a year, and we have around like 2 or 3 of them in one season. So it usually falls like in the first half of the year and then in the second half of the year. And when we go way back in history, they used to think that eclipses were like the end of the world, that it represented deaths and it was a catastrophe and disaster. Whereas now that's not really the case, as you have noticed. Like we don't all die when there's an eclipse. That would be quite hectic. But eclipses are such huge initiators for transformation. It's not for everyone always the case. You really have to look at like where the eclipses are falling in your charts, and which aspects it's making to other planets in your chart to give you an indication of like what kind of impact it will have on you. But you must also know like what is happening here on Earth is always a reflection of what is happening in the cosmos. We are not separate from the cosmos. We are not being affected by it. It is a reflection. We're not separate from it. We're all one. And so that's where we're going to take full radical ownership. Astrology just points out what is happening as it is a symbolic language, but then it's up to you to know like, okay, what am I going to do with this? So I looked at where the eclipses are falling into your charts. So if your birth time is correct, because we're not 100% sure, but you're a Leo rising, and for Leo risings, the eclipses this year are falling in your 4th and 10th house. So this is the axis between the house, like the home and family, and between like your career and your reputation and like how you put yourself out there in the public sphere. So what that could mean for you for this next coming 2 years is that there's more responsibilities, or you just like going for a higher position at work. You're pivoting in a new career direction. You're getting more public attention. So that's the 10th house. And then the 4th house could indicate that you're moving homes, that you're having changes happening within your family and understanding your childhood better as well. So this started from November last year, because then we had the eclipses moving from Gemini and Sagittarius to Taurus and Scorpio. And this is going to be until November 2023. So this is going to be the focus. Do you resonate with what I just said?
Yeah, so I can tell you, I think we mentioned this just before, right? So since November, I have lived in 5 different places, 5 different homes since November, because obviously I moved from my place in London to Portugal, and moved a couple of times. I've been in a few different places, and this is the kind of hopefully the final place. But I've moved country in November, exactly November, to come here. Oh, actually, maybe it was like late October, November, but we came and also came to here as well. And what's interesting is that's we are considering staying here for about a year, so maybe leaving maybe some point next year and going back to London, which is very eye-opening. But also there is that I changed jobs. I quit my corporate career. I'd worked in technology for the best part of 16 years, right? I was a software tester, so I worked with coding and stuff like that, and I quit that in August. And also I add in is that over the last, like all of January, I did a bunch of shows with Jazz FM where I was talking about masculinity and the different aspects of masculinity. And there's also is actually a few kind of media opportunities that have been coming my way over the last, even the last few weeks, some stuff that might come out in the next kind of week or two. So there's a lot of resonance in that. And there's also, I've been working with my own coaches, like a lot of talking about, it's like, how can I expand what I do? How can I move what I'm doing? I do a lot of work with men around dating and relationships and intimacy. How can I take that to the next level so I can impact more and more people?
Upscale it. Yes. Amazing. I love that so much. That's incredible. Yeah. So these are just the eclipses, right? So if we want to have more layers around like what is happening like month per month, and we look at the transits, but that's a whole different story. But I really wanted to share this with you because I thought it was quite interesting. Because you said indeed that you moved to Portugal, which is so exciting. And I'm also very happy and excited for you to see like how that's all going to unravel with your career and how you're going to upscale it. It's all happening.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's been a lot of movement in the last 6 months. The last 6 months of my life, there's been a lot of changes, in the last 6 months. And there's been a lot of big leaps, leaping into a new career in itself. It's funny, I was having a conversation with someone else about this, helping them with their own career shift. And I was just like, well, there's no kind of gentle, easy way to do it. There's no just like, oh yeah, I'm going to transition perfectly. There's always some form of leap of faith we have to take.
Yeah. It's all about full trust and surrender, and just going with the flow, like of life. Yeah. Riding those waves. Yeah. And just holding on to the vision, I guess. Right.
Definitely. It's a big one. One. You've got to just, when you have the awareness of your chart and, what's these different seasons and phases of life, when opportunities pop up in those times, you're like, oh, I can seize these. I know these things are going to be coming. You can prepare yourself almost mentally and go, I'm ready to seize any opportunities that arise in these areas of life, and also in these times as well.
Yeah, beautiful. I would love to share a bit more about your Saturn return. I mean, I know you're past that, like it's been 10 years now, or almost 10 years, but I just want to see, because I see something in your chart that has to do around communication. So I wonder, like, what's your relationship with communication? Because you don't have air in your charts, which is quite interesting, especially because you do have a podcast and you do show up and like you're really like activating that throat chakra and speaking your truth and sharing it with the world. That actually comes from that lack of earth. Earth is all about like intellectual abilities and the mind and communication, right? So I also have a lack of air in my charts, and I feel like that's kind of like a drive to like become good at communication, about like speaking your truth. And like, because maybe there was a time that you felt like misunderstood, right? Like when you were younger, or there was some trouble communicating what was living inside you. Do you feel that?
Yeah. So, I'm out here now with a podcast talking about relationships and dating, but it come from, much like you said earlier, it's like come from my own suffering, my own struggles with communicating and saying, like what it is I wanted, what it is I needed, or speaking like deeply from what I really love in relationship, but also like even just asking for what I needed, you know. And I think maybe this is something where I was so focused on for so many years, was like, how can I communicate what I want, what I feel with other people, and understand them as well a lot better. And also, more than anything, was like, how can I be more in tune with what I'm feeling, so that when I'm communicating, there is a level of what's truly there, and I'm not just communicating from a point of like, oh, I'm feeling something, but I don't need to feel something and pushing it down. So it's actually communicating what's there, what my feelings are. So it's been a real journey for me over the last easily probably 10 years into kind of.
Yes. Yeah, so that brings me to the Saturn return, which is between age 28 and 30, and it's at its peak at age 29. So Saturn return, this is like we all go through it. It's like a period of a bit restriction, but also taking more responsibility and gaining more emotional maturity, right? So wherever Saturn is placed in your chart, this gives an indication of what the Saturn lessons will be, you know, what the up leveling will be. There's like a shift in consciousness, and I see it with a lot of people that there's also an activation in their soul's purpose. It's usually around 29, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But your Saturn is placed in the third house, and the third house is ruled by Gemini, and your North Node is in Gemini. So there's like a huge invitation here to learn all about communication and learning, you know, and spreading it, you know, sharing it with the world. So Saturn placed in the third house, this could mean that around your Saturn return, you were like massively improving upon your communication abilities, or you were learning to travel, because it also rules short distance travel, and you were just developing like better writing and speaking or public speaking skills.
So I would have been 29. It's interesting actually, because at that time I was with my ex-girlfriend, and we were we actually started to do a lot of like weekend trips. I've always loved to travel, but she hasn't traveled very much. So I started to do a lot of short weekend trips across Europe and so forth. So there's definitely some travel in there then. And inside that relationship, it was a huge learning for me, because before that relationship, communication was like just painful for me, you know, really painful. And I'm always eternally grateful for my ex-girlfriend, because without her, I'd have never been able to start to realize the beauty of being able to communicate, and the beauty of love as well, of receiving love and giving it. Like, it was probably one of the first relationships I was in where I was like, this feels good, even though it feels kind of hard sometimes. And she was extremely patient with me in my difficulties. But we really got to a place where communication started to flow quite well, and there was a lot of care and love between us. But it really came from her level of acceptance of me and my acceptance of what I was, who I was, and not feeling shame around that, and being able to communicate that to her, which really would have happened around, you know, we met, I was 28, and we were together until I was 32. So it was a really evolutionary relationship for me.
Yes, yeah. You are here to become a master over communication. This is your purpose, because Saturn is the one who shapes it. You know, it requires hard work, but you will reap what you have sown. And it's uncomfortable, especially like in our youth and growing up, and like, you know, it's like we have to do something with it. Like, we feel it, but there's also some resistance. So the older we get, the better we have or are developing a relationship with our Saturn. And you also have your Pluto in the third house, and Pluto is the planet of death and transformation and rebirth. So this is the area in which you will experience a lot of like, transformation. So let's have a look now at your North Node in Gemini, because it's quite similar themes. I know that you love traveling because you have your moon in Sagittarius and your South Node as well. So when I look at the lunar nodes, which are called the North Node and the South Node, these are an indication of where you have been in the past, you know, in your youth, but also from past lifetimes, if you believe in that. That's the South Node. This is our comfort zone. You know, this is our shadow state as well. And we kind of want to let go of that because we have already like mastered those qualities, but they're not serving us in this lifetime. So there's an invitation to grow towards the North Node energy. This is our North Star. This is our life's purpose. This is where our healing and our growth lies, our highest potential. When we are more towards our North Node or completely in our North Node energy, that is when we are going to attract opportunities, situations, people that are in alignment with our highest self and our unique blueprint. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your North Node is in Gemini. So that means that the South Node is in Sagittarius. And this axis is all about communication, about learning, and about knowledge. So the challenge in this life is to learn to express yourself and spread your message through teaching, learning, and writing. You know, in a past lifetime as a Sagittarius South Node, you would have maybe been like a scholar or an adventurer, you know, a nomad or a guru. You know, you carry a lot of spiritual wisdom inside you. You know, it's that remembering from past lifetimes. So you are willing to leave home to search for spiritual truths, and you are listened to for your knowing. You know, you also have like a very adventurous spirit. You're a philosopher, you're the truth seeker, the traveler, the teacher, but you are never like truly settling down. You know, so if you feel like you are in your South Node energy, it will come up as trouble with focusing. You're constantly like multitasking, you know, your energy is so scattered. It's like all over the place, like not finishing anything, not committing. There's a lack of commitment here. It can show up in your relationships and your work and your hobbies and whatever. You're just like, I want to do it all. I want to do this and that, da, 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 da. And then eventually you just like, you don't do anything or you don't finish it, like what you've started.
I want to jump in there because why this really resonates with me is like, you know, I traveled for 2 years over between 2015 2017. I just packed my bags and I went traveling for 2 years around the world, and I've always loved to travel and find myself in different places. And it's funny you say like philosophy is something that's always really interests me, and a lot of my path through self-development into what I call kind of spiritual development and just, you know, relational development now started off with philosophy books. I picked up a book, probably there's one of the first kind of self-help, quote unquote, self-help books I picked up. I was given as a present on my 21st birthday by a good friend of mine. It's called Conversations with God. It's a book that I highly recommend to people still. But after that, I picked up a book about Western philosophy. And it's funny, I was talking to one of my clients about this yesterday, and it was like a Bible. It was huge, massive book. I think it was like 1,200 pages or something. And I was reading for ages, but it really expanded my mind in how we can think about our lives and how we interact with things. So I've always been a seeker of understanding, you know, like how can I understand things better? How can I understand, you know, initially it was things like money. How can I understand how money works? Because I was never taught how money works. And there's all these people around me, they know how money works. Let me understand. So let me understand geography. Like I've always loved geography. So I'm searching and understanding geography. How do people work? Okay, how does dating work? Like how does dating actually work? How do people meet and stuff like that? And it's, you know, my bookshelf is, I probably have in all my life, like up to now, I've probably not read more than 20 fictional books. I might have read maybe 200 non-fiction books, 200, 300 non-fiction books in my life. I just, fiction's okay, but I'm a lot more like geared towards what can I learn? How can I learn and understand this thing more deeply? And when you talked about, there was a lot of resonate, so I can just keep going on. When you were talking about the wanting to do lots of things, like my biggest problem at the moment is focus. Is like I'm trying to juggle many plates, and it means that I don't necessarily finish things or I'm rushing at the end. And it kind of reminds me of my Enneagram as well, because I'm a number 7, right? And the number sevens want to do everything and try everything and enjoy, be the life of the party, that sort of thing. So there's a lot in there that resonates. And then inside of commitment, which is something I've never really always found difficult, you know, commitment relationship wise, especially, is like committing to one person, committing to one thing. I want to be able to be free and do everything. So there's a real resonance with my experience of myself there.
Yeah, freedom is so important for you. And when it comes to traveling, so you've got your moon in Sag. So the moon talks about like how you find emotional fulfillment in this lifetime. You know, it's your key to happiness. Like, what do you do to fulfill your needs? And for you, it is like philosophy, spirituality, maybe religion, traveling, you know, something. It also has to do with like moving around a lot, like moving your body, working out, doing sports. This is also something how you find that emotional fulfillment. But when we look at traveling, and I mean then far away travel, you know, like to the other side of the world and discovering other cultures and discovering like how they work and talk with them, communicate with them, this is really appealing to you. Also because you have this from past lifetimes. But I would say in this lifetime, really focus on creating a home for yourself that is comfortable, and surround yourself with many different kinds of people, listen to their points of view, and engage like in meaningful and thoughtful communication. So this is really important. And it doesn't mean that you can't travel anymore. Like it will always become a part of you or over your life, but don't use it as a way to escape, because there's like a tendency of escapism here, you know, that's that fear of commitment maybe. So yeah, that's just something to watch out for. So you can still travel, but maybe focus on creating like a local community somewhere. Like you're now in Portugal for a little while, for 1 year, 2 years, maybe longer. Create a local community there. Not always looking like, okay, what's next? Where am I going to go to? Like I'm going to escape. I'm going to do this. You know, there's this big tendency to live a nomadic lifestyle, but it's not serving your highest good. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, definitely. Because like I love to travel, and I really did live a nomadic lifestyle for a couple of years where, you know, I didn't, again, I was talking to one of my clients about this last night. I was like, I got to the point in my life where time no longer was my limiting factor. Because for most of us, time is the thing that limits us, right? Time and money limit us, right? And what we can do in any given day or time. And I remember sitting, I think I was in Peru, and I was sitting in Peru, and someone said to me, "Oh, where are you going to be next week?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "What do you mean you don't know?" I said, "I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter where I'm going to be next week." And they said, "How can it not matter to you where you're going to be next week?" And I said, "Because next week, next month, it doesn't make a difference because I have time." And in that moment, I realized, I was like, my whole relationship to time in that moment, at that time, was different. I wasn't limited by time. I wasn't particularly limited by money. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had enough to do what I wanted. And it completely shifted where my priorities lie and how I wanted to be in the different moments. I remember standing with a guy in Colombia, just a random guy that started talking to me because he saw me taking photos. And we just stood on the side of the street for 2 hours talking about our lives. And I remember he walked away and I was like, that was really beautiful. And I just felt really light and really connected. And I thought to myself, I was like, if I was at home in London, I would have never done that because I wouldn't have had time. I wouldn't have had time to have that conversation. But at that point in my life, it was really important to be able to move like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and as a separate thing, one of the things I keep saying to also here is like, it's really good to create like a community of people here, like a community of people who are doing different things that complement each other, like to connect with people here and create a life here that is really in tune with where I want to head to, but also where other people are trying to move to.
I love that. You also have so much fire in your chart. You know, you're just like full of like so much like passion and adventure and creativity. You know, you really go for something. That's your Aries sun as well. You're such a great manifester. If you're just like, I want this, let's get it now. You know, you're like so impulsive and like so impatient, but it's also that warrior energy inside you. You know, you make shit happen. You manifest everything. And that's that fire. But just sometimes you have to be careful that you're not burning out, you know, you're burning yourself up because it's just like too much, you know, too impatient. I want it now.
Yes.
Yeah, you're definitely a big traveler and adventurer. So this is when we look at the archetype. Now let's have a look at the North Node in which house it falls. So if your birth time is correct, your North Node will fall into the 10th house. So this is a Capricorn house, and this is a journey towards being known for you. So this axis is between home, which is the 4th house, and the 10th house is about being out there in the world. You know, it's connected to the MC. It's like what we want to be seen for, what we want to be admired for. So let's have a look first at the karma of the fourth house. So it has to do with Cancer, and Cancer is like this beautiful, warm, feminine, nurturing energy, right? It's your comfort zone. It's actually your home, your private life, and your family and your roots. There's a lot going on around family, but so maybe, I don't know, like what was your relationship with your mom? Are you attached to her?
Yeah, so me and my mum, I would say that I lived most of my life I grew up with my mum and my three sisters. My parents were together when I was born, but not through my remembering lifetime. So my dad is a bit distant from me, not just in terms of distance. He's not actually that far away in terms of from where I lived in London, probably only about 5 or 6 miles. But as a character, he's very distant as a man, which has always affected me, as
Emotionally
being,
available?
yeah, completely, really, and really unavailable. And I see it more now. Is unavailable not because sometimes we see people as emotionally unavailable because they don't want to be emotionally available. He doesn't have the capacity to be
Oh, no,
emotionally
no, no.
available,
My
and
dad is the
it's
same. Yeah.
and it's taken many
Yeah.
years for me to really accept that and understand. But so yeah, I'm quite close to my mom in ways, and sometimes we've had our relationship has been difficult, especially through my 20s, where we used to rub up against each other a lot. But I'd say that things are a lot better now, just through the fact that not living together is amazing, right? We get on a lot better when we don't live together. But yeah, so I'd
Yeah.
say I'm quite attached to my mother. She's raised me.
Okay. Yes, it's beautiful. So I feel like because of that sound note in the fourth house, your mama bear is really important for you. And you're also kind of like a natural caretaker and nurturer. You have like a strong sense of empathy and emotional intelligence and love. You're able to create like a warm and safe home. There's also a highly intuitive placement. But when we look at the North Node in the 10th house, which is your purpose, it's really a lesson around coming out of your comfort zone and keep like pushing yourself out there, like letting yourself be seen. You're meant to become a leader, to create your own legacy, to build that legacy and create your own masterpiece. You are here to lead with your heart. So it's like that combination of the feminine and masculine paradigm in leadership. You're merging the two energies and showing up as a leader, as a caring leader. So yeah, you're here to make a name for yourself. It's a house that is connected to visible success, autonomy, authority, and all of that. So having your own business is actually really great for your North Node energy.
Wow.
Like creating your own baby. Yeah. Do you
Wow.
resonate with that?
It's interesting because I see it's not like I've done quite a lot of work intuitively with like intuitive studies with some of my former coaches. And it's funny, one of the things that I have my own resistance to, if I'm really resistance to, is like not just leadership is being out in the world, being seen, being judged, being critiqued. I come from my father is highly critical as a person. So my inner critic is very activated with myself. So I see for myself, when I do put myself out in the world, there is a lot of resistance from me. There is a desire to do it. There's a desire to I have a podcast and I'm across Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But to do all those things, I've really had to push through this resistance to do so. So I see that there is a path for me in leadership, and particularly heart-based leadership. It's interesting you say that, because I'm writing a workshop and an 8-week course for men around masculinity, and a big part of what I talk about is like this leadership that we don't see enough of. We see a lot of leadership in our world, which is around greed and furtherment of personal gain. We don't see much like heart-based leadership, like whether that's in relationship, whether that's in career, whether that's in our world affairs. And actually that is the type of masculinity that's really missing from our world.
Yes.
And it's something that I've connected with a lot more almost accidentally in my relationship. It's like going, oh wait, I used to just be like, what do I want? And now in relationship, I'm like, what's the most loving thing, not just for me, but for the relationship as an entity? And how do I lead from that place continually?
Yes, absolutely. So this is your unique gift that you get to share with the world. So now you know, and merging that paradigm between the masculine and feminine energies with the Gemini energy, what has to do with local travel, communication, learning, being the teacher, but also the forever student, right?
Mm.
Merging that all together, this is your purpose. This is why you came back into this lifetime. These are your karmic tests as well. So a couple of questions that you can ask yourself on your journey of personal growth and self-exploration is, am I balancing my public and private life? It's that 4th and 10th house. Am I feeling seen and heard in the world?
Mm.
But also, am I leading from my heart? Like, how am I showing up? And I find it quite interesting to note that you are a Leo rising. So I love that Leo energy. I'm also a Leo sun. So woo, we should start a clap. We've got cookies and cocktails. So Leo energy, there's some really valuable lessons to learn for Leo in this lifetime. And it's about not being dependent on external validation, but learning to give that validation to yourself. It's like a journey of self-love, of self-worth. It's a journey of learning how to become your own best friend. And it's tough. It's so difficult. And there are going to be tests. But that's the beauty of it. It's like an invitation to love ourselves a little bit more and to not be depending our success, on outwardly success, but really like being successful just for being grateful, seeing the abundance in your life. And abundance is everywhere, don't you think? It's like in the flowers, it's in the plants, it's in nature, it's in your health and all of that. But if you don't get like the instant gratification or validation from other people, then it's actually an invitation to look at like, okay, how can I give that validation and that applause to myself?
Yeah. Yeah. Even as you say that, it's interesting because, like, you get not used to, but through my life, I've had people telling me, "Oh, you're doing really well. You're really great at this. Oh my God, Ruben." And it's almost information that I almost don't really hear. Like, I don't know how it feels for you when people tell you these things, because you're so used to hearing it. It's almost a case of you hear it and you're like, yeah, that's what everyone says. That's just what people say. And for me, it has been a journey of like going, like approving of self. Like I talk about this a lot with people. It's like, how can you show yourself that you approve of yourself? Forget what other people's approval looks like, but what can you do? What little things can you do to approve of yourself? Like, that might be making the room you're in feel beautiful, might look nice. Like my desk now, I've got a couple of plants, I've got some crystals. It's just like, it looks like a nice desk. It's like, that's me kind of approving of my worth to have something around me that looks beautiful. Being in a nice home, these sorts of little things. But it is definitely a battle against the other side, which is the kind of critical nature of me, which is like always like, God, you got that wrong. How did you fuck that up? So it's definitely something that I am aware of and having to really battle with.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm interested for you actually, from learning astrology in your own chart. What sort of blockages and patterns has it allowed you to kind of uncover?
So I was speaking about this in the beginning with my Chiron, which is the pain point in the 7th house, and its opposition, my Saturn. So that means that I have some father wound issues as well. My father, he's got good intentions, but he doesn't know how to show up as the divine masculine or as a father, like there was also like a lack of interest from his side. Like he was never there. He was emotional, unavailable. And that was quite tricky for me, especially as a Leo woman myself. I was craving that recognition and validation and applause and so much more from my dad, and I never received it. I had this conversation with him once, and I'm like, Dad, why don't you ever say that you're proud of me? And he's like, yeah, but I did. I said it like 5 years ago. And I was like, oh, so you just said once, and this is like fine for the rest of my life. Like, don't you know I'm a Leo? Like, I crave validation. Like, I want you to say this every single day. So that was a big insight for him as well. So it's been really challenging, our relationship, and it's been ups and downs, but I am able to communicate my needs more clearly with him in a non-violent way. So we had this conversation a little while ago, but so there has been some huge tests around that for me, like around my self-worth, and it was being reflected in my relationships. So I was attracting men into my life who were not conscious, who were not willing to do the work, who were not willing to take responsibility. And I wasn't at the time as well. You know, this is how I started doing the work, because I was like, ugh, I can't deal with this. There's no growth here. It's only suffering. So I was attracting men who were very similar to my dad. And as soon as I realized that, even like my ex-partner who I dated for 3.5 years, he has a very similar birth chart like my dad.
Wow.
And as soon as I found out, I was like, wow, this shit is scary. But it is true. You attract like the energies from your parents. Like for me, it was the case for my dad. I don't know if it was the case with you and your mom, for example, or that you attracted partners that look more like your dad.
Yeah. My mum's a very nurturing woman, very, very nurturing woman. You know, she's got 4 kids and she looks after everybody around her. She looks after. And I've almost always attracted women who have the same qualities of nurturing and, you know, looking after, wanting to look after me and my needs. So it's been, it's very interesting when you start to see that.
Yeah, the patterns. Yeah, absolutely. That's when the healing starts. That's when the journey starts. So that has been like a huge theme in my life, and then also around communication. So I have my North Node conjunct Mercury and also very little air in my chart. So when I grew up, I didn't speak. Like I didn't know how to express myself. Like my mom was asking me questions like, how was your day at school, etc. Like I didn't know how to speak. Like literally, she must have thought that I was not so like intelligent, or there was something wrong with me. But my mom kept on trying, and I had to work really hard to open up that blocked throat chakra. So I came back into this lifetime to activate that and to speak my truth, to share my truth with the world, to not be scared, to not hold back, and just keep myself small in that regard. So that's why I also just started my podcast, and it's such an amazing way to activate that North Node energy. Yeah.
To be speaking into the world.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also something that I feel a lot of resistance towards. That's the North Node energy, like what you were saying as well. It's like, oh, I do want to go that way, but I feel resistance and I feel scared, but I do want to, because I know it's good for me. And it takes like years and years and years before you finally get there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like pushing through resistance. There's often so much gold on the other side of our own resistance that we are experiencing.
Yeah, and we're just holding ourselves back most of the time. So just sometimes receiving a little bit of guidance, if it is cosmic guidance through astrology or another modality, it's great to be able to fully trust and surrender and grow towards more self-acceptance and eventually self-love.
Yes, totally. There's a lot of self-love come up today.
Yes.
I have a question actually, because I feel like there was this there's times in the year that are probably more productive to creating, to manifesting. Would that be correct? Or is that very dependent on each person?
It's very depending on each person. You really have to look at the chart as an individual. I don't really do like collective or mundane astrology. I really look at you as an individual, and I work with your chart and your potential and how the transits are working with your charts. But where did you get that information from? Because I haven't heard that.
No, I was just wondering, because I remember last year I seemed to hear the phrase about Mercury in retrograde continuously felt like all of the back end of the year. So I guess I was wondering, this was a time everyone's like, God, things are going to go wrong. My laptop stopped working, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, so if there's times in a year where things are going to go badly or going to be difficult, there's going to be times in a year where things start to go well and can blossom and we can start to create. So I was wondering if there's parts of 2022, for instance, which are going to be really fruitful for the people in the world.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that you connected to Mercury retrograde. It all makes sense now. Thank you for clarifying that. So we do experience Mercury retrograde 3 times a year, and it's for 3 weeks. So we just had it now in January. It was in Aquarius and a bit of Capricorn. And for me, actually, I experienced this as a really beautiful, creative, and inspiring time. I was getting like all these new ideas, and I was writing a lot. But they usually say that Mercury retrograde, like your technology stops working, or there's like just some problems with like traveling, and there's some cancellations, just like some things that are going wrong. Or but sometimes it can also just be a very creative and inspiring time. And that was the case for me. I don't know how it was now for you in January. But Mercury retrograde, yeah, it does occur quite often. So it's going to happen each year. But I do feel like overall that 2022 is going to be so much more positive because we have Jupiter in Pisces this year. And that brings so much more abundance and faith and inspiration and much more travel, So, but I feel like we could do like a whole other episode on the transits of this year because there's like so much to unpack there.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess we've been going for quite a while. Time flies. So I guess the listeners are wondering, of all the things that, how can they connect with you, work with you? Where can they find your podcast? What's it called?
Yes. So my business is called As Above, So Below. So that's also the name of the podcast. And you can also find my astrology page on Instagram at asabovesobelow.eu. It's also the name of the website. And my personal Instagram is at Caitlin. So come hang out on the Instagrams and let's be friends. Let's connect. I share a lot about astrology, but also conscious relationships and communication and about my life on my personal Instagram. So if people want to get involved, I do one-on-one readings. So you can always reach out to book a reading so we can explore your unique blueprints. Or you can have a look at my website. I organize a lot of retreats and women's circles.
Beautiful, beautiful. And are you all offering coaching for people in spiritual matters as well?
Yes, it's kind of like a combination of everything that I do. It's not just astrology. It's like the point where I start from, but then it just takes off into like different directions. And I just work with like what I see in the charts. Like each person is so different and so unique. So it's a lot of fun for me. It's like solving a puzzle.
Awesome. It's been such a pleasure to actually speak to you, to speak properly in a face-to-face manner, and be beautiful one day. If we find yourself in Portugal, we can have a face-to-face conversation and a cocktail as the sun goes down.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening in. We'd love to, as I say often the podcast, I know that I've received a few messages from people who have taken things away from the episode, learned things. I'm sure me and Cato would love to hear, what did you get from this episode? What did you learn? What did you understand now that you can take into your life and maybe increase your personal level of self-mastery? So, feel free to get in contact with us on Instagram or by email as well. But until next week, folks, thank you very much for listening. Ciao, ciao.